Hey everyone, we're live. Welcome to Hashing It Out. I'm Jordan Mack. I'm a senior software engineer here at the Nervos Foundation, and today it is my privilege to introduce the man you probably already all know. He's one of the co-founders of Nervos, and now he's the CEO of Tunnel Vision Labs. I'm talking, of course, about Kevin Wang. Kevin, welcome back.
Hey, Jordan. How are you?
I'm doing well. I'm doing well. And how have you been? It's been a while since we've last talked to you.
Yeah, it has been a while indeed. Yeah, good to come back.
Great. Well, today we are going to be talking about interoperability on Nervos, and we're talking about the past, the present, and the future of that. But before we get started, I have to mention the three things I always mention. People who have seen this before, they're probably sick of hearing me say this every time, but we have to say it because we keep getting asked the same questions over and over again. So without further ado, the three things are: number one, we're not going to talk about the price today. Number two, we're not going to be talking about its
That's
exchanges
great.
that we're going to be on in the future. That is illegal, people. You got to realize that. And number three, all opinions that are expressed on this show are of the individuals, not of the Nervos Foundation. So anyway, Kevin, the last time we talked to you, which was I think a little over a year ago, you were still with the Nervos Foundation, and since then things have changed a little bit. You've spun off to Tunnel Vision Labs. Can you tell us a little bit about what that is and why it was created?
Yeah, so I think since the beginning of the project, of the Nervos project, I mostly worked in the foundation, and um, but I feel that I worked at the foundation about 2.5, about 3 years ish, and but I think things have changed a little bit. We are letting the foundation become more decentralized, and then we're relying more on the community to make a lot of decisions, including marketing, including we have a community DAO, so people can do some of the budgeting, and we definitely intend to move more towards that direction. I think it's good for a layer one blockchain that's have a roadmap to gradually move towards decentralization and have community involved in decision making and general government. So the path is there. I think I came from a more technical background and trained as an engineer, and so uh, you know definitely some part of me wanted to dive into the deep end and then sort of not just be a voice to Nervos, but also contribute on some what I believe is critical missing infrastructure, missing pieces that can help Nervos to move to the next level.
Right, right. Yeah, definitely there's a lot of pieces that we're still putting together. So let's get into the main topic of interoperability. First, we should probably cover the very basics a little bit quickly, of course. So, which is what is blockchain interoperability?
Yeah, so as the name suggests, right? So blockchain interoperability is when it's how you can have multiple blockchains interact with each other. So blockchain, I mean, from technology point of view, blockchains are pretty unique in that each blockchain is their have their own consensus network and nodes and running validations and so on and so forth to to enforce the state consistency of that specific blockchain. So it's really, when developers build apps on the single blockchain, right? It's really to it's really easy to make sure that transactions are tracked and consensus are achieved. But when a developer were to work with two different blockchains or two different applications sitting on different blockchains, it's a lot trickier, right? So, um, we have to rely on asynchronous message passing, which we probably will dive into a lot more, during this talk. Um, but the status quo today for blockchain is every blockchain is its own island, right? And every blockchain has its own community, and then set of applications, and it's difficult for transactions to happen across blockchains. So blockchain interop is to bring all the blockchain together to have a platform and a way of two blockchains to communicate and for application to span across different blockchains.
Right. Yeah, I would say definitely blockchains are sovereign by default. That's what they're intended to be. They're resilient and they stand on their own without any relying on any other third parties. So getting them to interop is a little bit of a tricky thing. That's not what their default is. But why would you say that interoperability in general is truly important to the end users?
Yeah, I think for end users, most end users have a specific task that want to get done, right? So whether it's about trading, whether it's about um, buying NFTs and so on and so forth, right? So they want to achieve a specific goal. Now, the specific technology foundation, right? So that what they want to do, for example, they may want to trade Bitcoin to Ethereum. Now, Bitcoin and Ethereum are on different blockchains. So to accomplish that goal, they will need to operate with two different blockchains, right? Um, so this is why we see centralized exchanges, for example, are popular because they provide an interface uh, for users to be able to accomplish what they want to do without knowing which blockchain they interact. Um, so I would say, centralized exchanges are probably the first generation of blockchain interop platforms. It's kind of interesting to think of that way because they are themselves centralized platforms, but they do interact with the multiple blockchains. Now, decentralized way of people interact with multiple blockchains, I think the idea has been around for many years, but I feel really the breakthrough has been done for the last year or so. It's been a lot of interesting approach that's been applied. Um, so, once we are able to accomplish blockchain interoperability, then blockchain itself will more become internet, right? So, for example, when you go to internet, you don't really care which network that you're connecting to and interacting with, right? You go to Twitter, you go to Amazon, you go to these products, and you want to do specific things, right? So same thing for blockchain interop, right? So users can just connect to applications, where applications can connect to interoperable blockchains to deliver uh, the product that user wants to use.
Right. So it's really essential to user experience as a whole, that we actually make this kind of stuff happen, make it accessible to the average user.
Yeah,
Uh,
yeah,
um, so let's back up for 1 second, though. You mentioned that it's been a long time coming, and the decentralized version, of course, is much more difficult than the centralized version of
absolutely.
interoperability.
Yeah.
So what are some of the biggest challenges that we have in the industry right now for interoperability?
Yeah. So I think if we look back to the history, right? So from the early days, like Bitcoin, Ethereum, there has been sort of various blockchain interop solutions, probably starting with atomic swaps, where it's a single use case, right? So sort of if you promise to give me Bitcoin, I promise you to give you some sort of ether and rely on cryptographic proofs to be able to deliver that. And then people realize that a lot of the core use cases for blockchain interop it's around tokens, right? So this is when token bridges were built, and I think this is about maybe 2 years ago where we started to see a lot of the token bridges. What they do is they help you lock a token on one blockchain and then mint another token on a separate blockchain, right? So I think it's a very interesting approach, and then allow um, users to move assets around different blockchains. But that also has caused a lot of the security problem. We probably have seen too many bridge exploits that mostly because the security tech or the a lot of them are externally verified, and then the security properties of these bridges isn't very easy to be reasoned with, and then also they leave like honeypots on these different blockchains, so it's very easy to be exploited. So we've seen a lot of that, and then we started to see, from there, then we started to see, general message passing as a sort of foundation, and then bridge built on top of that layer. I think this is we see a lot of that today, to have dedicated message passing layers between blockchains. So the idea is what you pass around may not be just tokens, but this tech allow you to pass basically like packets or bytes, right? To arbitrary bytes between different blockchains. And then they can represent tokens for sure. They can also represent, call data. They can represent transactions, arbitrary transactions. They allow, different contracts to call other contracts sitting on different blockchains, right? So those are, so this new generation or this new wave of interop tech, and then based on that, developers can better architect their solutions, right? So whether it's who custody the funds, what's the security model, and how do you upgrade those security models, and so on and so forth, can be more reasonably built, instead of just one size fits all solution like previously with the bridges. So yeah, so I think it's been a long way, but also I think this is also very fast evolving space, especially with we're seeing many new blockchains coming up, whether they're layer 2s, layer 3s, app chains, supernets, and modular blockchains, and so on and so on. So for blockchain to reach mass adoption, the only thing that we know for sure is that there are going to be a lot more blockchains, probably going to be thousands or tens of thousands, eventually even millions, if we talk about applications being on different blockchains. Yeah, so how to make them interop is going to be super important.
Right. So let me see if I could and just sum that up, and correct me if I'm wrong. But one of the biggest challenges that we have right now is that the bridges themselves are concentrated locations of liquidity and value, which is making one of the biggest problems, because they keep getting attacked. And I believe the statistics right now are in the billions of dollars have been lost
absolutely.
to bridges. So it is a big problem. That's a big problem for mass adoption, of course, we have to solve. And so for the next generation of this, for the next generation of interoperability and bridging, and just in general, we really have to enable a much more secure transport layer, which is going to be message passing. Did I get that right?
Yeah, I mean, it's already happened, right? So you already see quite a few sort of message passing primitives being built. And, if we go back to the topic interoperability, if you make the connection to like an internet, I mean, the name suggests it's internet network, right? So it's basically a interoperable network of networks. That's what internet is, right? So if you make the parallel to blockchains, then blockchain interoperability is just a network of interoperable blockchains. Yeah.
Right. Okay. So before we move on, last thing on the introduction to interoperability here. Why is Nervos the ideal platform for this?
Yeah. So again, we've thought about this for a while, and then Nervos has many primitives built specific for interoperability. One of the core challenge when you build interoperable solutions or interoperable blockchains is you either have to require, so put it this way, it's easy to build interoperable solutions for blockchains that are very much alike, right? So this is where, for example, Cosmos is known as a community for interoperability in blockchains, right? A lot of that built on the foundation, the fact that all those blockchains are built on the same framework, which is Cosmos SDK, right? So once you use the same framework to build blockchains, then you know exactly how other blockchains are built. Therefore, it's easy to verify transactions across different blockchains, right? Um, so that's one direction, that's one approach, right? That's the Cosmos approach. But the other approach is a lot more challenging. It's, how do we build interoperable blockchains for blockchains that we don't know how they were built in the first place, right? So instead of asking everybody to adopt your standard, how you can build the right primitives so you can adopt everybody else, or even future-proof, right? Future blockchain that's not being invented today, how do you cater to those, right? So this is sort of, this is how Nervos, different starting point for Nervos, and then Nervos is able to build. So this is, again, we can talk about the history a little bit in the next several questions. This is, we started with thinking about, instead of asking everybody just to use our tools to build chains, we should be build primitives for every chain, right? So Nervos is built pretty, very differently from mainstream chains, where it's UTXO model, and it's extensible or programmable into UTXO model, and then with a RISC-V virtual machine. So which means it's very friendly for developers to deploy crypto primitives to Nervos as so-called smart contracts, right? So for Nervos, equivalent to scripts. This is very easy for Nervos because the execution environment is very bare to the metal, right? So the same library may cost, if you were to rewrite in Solidity, for Ethereum and EVM chains, it may cost just way too much, gas to be able to execute those, to run those libraries. Where in Nervos, because they use a very low-level virtual machine, it's very easy for Nervos to be able to execute those transactions. And Nervos itself is also cryptographically neutral. Even the default signature algorithm, for example, is built within the virtual machine. It's executed by the virtual machine instead of hard-coded. So that means Nervos is very scalable cryptographically, right? And this is very different from other blockchains, where you would need hard forks, which is always political, and pre-compiles and that sort of thing to be able to cryptographically scale. So this is one of the core strengths. And then so build on top of this, you can, because when you validate each other's consensus, like other blockchains consensus, proofing, then the foundation for that is you have to have the primitives to be able to execute these proofs on chain, right? And this is easy for Nervos for the reason that I talk about. So anybody can deploy a new primitive and the new proofing method to validate the other chain's consensus on Nervos, right? So for example, Polkadot, Cardano, and Cosmos, they all use very different primitives to validate signatures and consensus and so on, to make sure to prove that a transaction has happened on those blockchains. Now, if you were to validate natively for these transactions on Ethereum, then you have to use Solidity to code all these primitives yourself, and then probably will overflow your block gas limit anyway. And now for Nervos, it's easy just to be able to deploy these primitives directly into on-chain itself, so you can validate these transactions of other chains. So I think that's a core strength of Nervos. And then over the years, we are sort of building on top of that, and then to bring this. I mean, this is a piece of technology, infrastructure technology, that's very down in the stack. So what we're trying to do right now is to bring that up to close to users and close to use cases, and then to allow like real you know real use cases to users, so that people can see what can be done now that you can have interoperable blockchains. So this is what we have been working on for the last several months, almost a year or so.
Yeah. So let's get into the Nervos's early steps, the past portion of this discussion, which is our early steps to interoperability. Can you tell us some of the first things that we came out with? I would say going back all the way to 2020.
Yeah, sure. So let me see. I think and a lot of OGs probably know this, right? So the early sort of products for this is to be able to use Ethereum wallets to be able to hold Nervos assets and transfer as a wallet, right? So the first product for this is called Portal Wallet, right? So where you can use MetaMask as a wallet for Nervos. And then I know some other folks have also, these are not to production, but some other folks have also experimented with other type of wallets as well. But then MetaMask is the first one. It's built by a community team called Portal Wallet. And then on the infrastructure level, this is this is called PW lock. This is what enables the Portal Wallet ability to use MetaMask for Nervos network. So PW lock it's essentially a primitive, a cryptographic primitive that allows on-chain interpretation of Ethereum signature algorithms, right? So you can sign transactions on MetaMask and then be able to validate those transactions on Nervos. Therefore, it can be used as Nervos wallet. So I would say that's probably the early step, right? That's the earliest step. And then I think from there, we wanted to be able to be more compatible and, other than just supporting, MetaMask, we wanted to be able to support other bridges. I think, I think I'm probably jumping a little bit in timeline. I think this is bringing us much more like to recent time. If we go by the timeline, let's see. So that's 2020, and then we did some offerings on account abstraction, which again, it's account abstraction is a hot topic today in Ethereum communities, for example. But Nervos actually is built account abstraction ready from the day one, right? So it's the same reason, because Nervos does not sort of enshrine a specific way of defining what is account, and then how can accounts because Nervos fundamentally is not a account model blockchain. It's a UTXO level model blockchain. So as long as you can unlock a cell, a UTXO, you can move it and spend it, then whatever defines the unlocking mechanism is defined as an account, right? So for UTXO level blockchains. So Nervos is account abstraction from day one. And when we talk about Portal Wallet using MetaMask and so on and so forth, using Ethereum accounts as a stand-in for so sort of Nervos account, that's one example, right? And after Portal Wallet or PW Lock, and we built Omni Lock, which is the evolution of PW Lock, which allows, again, the same MetaMask compatibility, but also a few more libraries and token standards, right, that support user-defined tokens. And so that's OmniLock, right? And from there, then we have bridges. This is, I think, around 2021 or 2022. First bridge was launched as a dedicated token bridge, first between Ethereum and Nervos, and then from Binance Smart Chain to Nervos. So the idea is, from Ethereum, that's, smart contract world, that's, the most TVL and most users and assets. And then from Binance, then you can pretty much get any exchange listed assets to Nervos through Binance Smart Chain.
Right.
So
And here, let me interrupt you just for one moment. I want to
Mhm.
back up just for a second back to Portal Wallet and PW Lock because people might not realize that this was really the first offering I believe that we had to really accomplish that. And I don't even know if we were using the term account abstraction back then. Do you remember? Like, I don't know if
no,
we.
no, it's not so much.
Yeah, we didn't even fully have a term to that, especially the industry, to describe what was actually being done
Nobody
on
was talking
Nervos.
about account abstraction at the time. Yeah.
Yeah. So this was brand new, and I remember it was one of my first projects when I came to the foundation was to assist with the grant review for um, the PW SDK, which included PW Lock. And it took me a while to understand what was going on. But I finally had that light bulb moment and understood what it was doing. It was really remarkable what they had achieved. In fact, there's actually features in PW Lock which were never actually activated. More advanced features that not many people know about that interact with much deeper integration with MetaMask.
Mhm.
The reason it was never turned on is because it only worked with MetaMask. Unfortunately, so many wallets out there that don't support the same depth of features that they couldn't turn it on successfully. But that is Lay 2 is the team. They are a very very talented team, and they're actually the same team but behind Unipass,
Mhm.
which people have probably used, especially with some of the NFTs back in the past. And so, let's see. I believe that PW Lock supported Ethereum, EOS, Tron, Bitcoin, and Dogecoin. All of those, even though it was pretty much mostly used for Ethereum, I would say. And then OmniLock, of course, is an extension of that, which adds more features. It adds various different modes for different smart contract integration. It has more support um, that's going to be added also for more chains in the future. And then moving into ForceBridge, yeah, ForceBridge, Nervos, Ethereum, Binance Smart Chain, and I believe that right now it has a total of 43 assets that are supported across the different three chains. So it's actually it's quite a large product. It looks very simple on its features, but it's actually doing quite a bit below the hood.
Mhm. Yeah, there's a lot of engineering that go to Force Bridge because again, when we build it, we realize it's a very like security. It needs to be very security centric. It needs to be very like safety first type of product, right? So there's a lot of check and balance and error monitoring, and there's a lot of stuff happening on the background people really don't realize. But yeah, so that's Force Bridge. It's a token bridge and for Nervos.
Right, and then we have, I believe, Godwoken Bridge is the next one we should mention, which is different from Force Bridge.
Yeah, so
So,
Godwoken, for people that probably new to Nervos, Godwoken is a layer two optimistic rollup, EVM compatible optimistic rollup built on Nervos layer one. And as a optimistic rollup, and every optimistic rollup have something called canonical bridge, right? That connect what its settlement layer to the layer two itself. And then I would argue the bridge is what makes them layer two instead of separate blockchains, right? So with Godwoken as a layer two, we also built Godwoken Bridge, which allow you to transfer any assets from Nervos layer one to layer two, and then also from layer two to layer one as well. So with both Godwoken Bridge and Force Bridge, you could transfer any assets from Ethereum and Binance Smart Chain to Nervos layer two, which is Godwoken.
right, and it supports also, by the way, both chains. That's Godwoken version 0 and Godwoken
Yeah,
version 1.
yeah.
So allowing assets to be moved between those two easily as well. And I believe I counted 46, roughly 46 asset types that are supported on both those chains there. And so we also have a bunch of third-party bridges, which we integrated with.
Yeah. So now, before we go to that, having a limited footprint in terms of the bridging, I think also, I guess has its own limitations, right? Because we support Ethereum and Binance Smart Chain, but at the same time, we're seeing more and more blockchains coming up, and then a lot of our EVM, a lot of from other ecosystems like Cosmos and Solana and whatnot. So it's for us to build all the bridges. I mean, that you have to have a dedicated team that focus on just bridge building, right? And then catching up, following all the blockchains that were to be launched. So the approach that we're taking is by having sort of a canonical bridge, like for example Ethereum and Nervos. What you get is a set of canonical tokens, right? So for example, on USDC, USDT, on Godwalken, for example, are force bridge, essentially force bridge tokenized assets from Ethereum, right? And once you have that, what you're able to do is to use third-party bridges. I think we've got Seller, we've got multi-chain, but unfortunately, multi-chain has suffered some exploits. But I think from what I see, our users really didn't suffer a lot of these loss because most of the liquidity is coming from Force Bridge. But we're able to provide third-party bridges to help users to be able to come in and out from, especially Nervos Layer 2, much more easily to more blockchains. So the downside for Godwalken being an optimistic rollup is when you withdraw from Layer 2 to Layer 1, you have to wait. I think the current wait is about 10 days. So for people that don't want to wait, they could use the third-party bridges. They need to go through a liquidity solution and then use the third-party bridges to be able to go to their desired destination directly. So
Right,
so that will that'll make the exchange experience much better.
Yeah. I think that's definitely, there's a lot of different chains out there that are not supported by Force Bridge right now too. So if you want an easier path to get there, C-Bridge and multi-chain are probably good options for that. I believe C-Bridge has 22 other chains that are supported, and multi-chain is 28 different other chains.
Don't use multi-chain now. Multi-chain just had a hack.
Okay, all right, yeah.
I mean, nobody
so
knows
some risk. Clearly some risk involved with using some of these third-party bridges.
Well, I mean, multi-chain asked their users not to use them, so it's not just me saying this out in public.
Oh, they actually told people not to use their own bridge. Oh, wow,
you can check out their Twitter. So yeah, so use Seller Bridge for now.
Right, and then we also have one more we should just mention, which is XP Network, the NFT bridge, which is I believe connected to 27 other chains and adding more, and constantly adding more. I mean, that's a really nice one too. If you need to get your NFTs over to and from OpenSea, that's the way to do it.
Yep, absolutely.
Right, so let's keep moving though before we run out of time. We need to talk about Axon a little bit. So before we dive into what we're adding with Axon, can you give us a very brief summary on what Axon is?
Yeah, so Axon is a high-performance EVM sidechain network, and it's not a new blockchain like deployed blockchain itself, but it's a framework to make high-performance blockchains. So the idea is to be able to use that as a foundation for layer 2s on top of Nervos.
Right. So why is this important to the interoperability agenda?
Yeah, because I mean, one of the base, one of the base, like a foundation feature for Axon is to make it as interoperable as possible, right? So this is also one of our thesis as well, and we can dive into that, into use cases and whatnot. Because whenever you launch a new layer two or app chain and a new blockchain, right away, like day one, you're facing with interoperability problems because when you launch a new chain, um, you don't have liquidity, right? And you probably have your own native token, but there's nothing else, right? You don't have stable coins, and then there is no way for you to deposit to bridge to centralized exchanges. You probably don't have a wallet. If you're EVM compatible, maybe MetaMask could work. Um, and there's also no users, right? And there's no funds, right? So to a new blockchain. So to have sort of chain building network without thinking about how this would be part of a bigger ecosystem interoperable chain, it's just not possible, right? So you have to think about not just how people to launch a chain, but how can they have access to the infrastructure and users and funds and uh, you know off-chain infrastructure like exchange and wallet and whatnot. So this is how Axon is built with building interoperability features.
Right. So would you say what is the main interoperability feature? Would that be Synapse?
Yeah. So Synapse is again, this goes back to our basic previous discussion about message passing versus token bridges. So Synapse is the built-in message passing protocol bundled together with Axon, right? So the idea is if you launch an Axon chain, Synapse is right there, compatible, built into the Axon framework. That Synapse itself is IBC compatible. So IBC is one of the leading sort of interoperability standards that's primarily used in the Cosmos ecosystem. So by being IBC compatible, you're able to interact with other, any Cosmos change or change built on top of Cosmos SDKs very easily, right? And there's also efforts that are, today that making, IBC more compatible with, EVM chains as well. So I think in the future, there's a very, very high likelihood that IBC can become the default sort of transport protocol of the choice, right? And then having Axons, deeply integrated with the IBC allows you to leverage all that ecosystem to pass secure messages between different blockchains. And then there is, all the stuff we talk about: account abstraction, crypto primitives, Nervos layer one, cell model. Those are also built within Axon as well, right? So which means wallet compatibility, right? So again, if you want to launch a blockchain and go to Solana or Cardano communities and say, hey, everybody, you can just use your existing wallets and then be able to transfer funds to my chain, or probably just provide liquidity or some other whatever the app does, or buy NFTs. It would be very trivial, right? Because the message passing is built in, and the sort of account abstraction or external chain accounts or wallet compatibility also built into Axon chain as well. So you can say Axon is not just a fast performance, EVM chain, but we try to leverage a lot of the advantage of Nervos.
Right. Okay. Yeah, that's interesting. I didn't actually realize that cell model was in there as well. Um,
Also CKBVM.
yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's good to know. And very important and factor there. Would you say so? I'm curious about this. So we know that EVM started on Ethereum, and then it kind of
Yeah.
it blew up, and now it's on like dozens of chains. Um, IBC. Would you say that this is likely just like EVM? This is probably going to be the de facto standard in the future for interoperability. That is.
Um, it's Okay, so maybe we should scale back a little bit, talk about like even within like the supposed interoperability, they're the stack of technologies, right? Just like internet has different stacks. So when we talk about interoperability, on the bottom there is message passing, and even with message passing, there are typically the three concerns, which is um, message semantics, right? So how do you express a message, within a cross-chain with a cross-chain? How do you express a transaction, for example, or event on blockchain A with a message, right? That's semantics. And then you have sort of routing and uh, how given if a message is supposed to deliver to another blockchain, but how do you find it? Through what other chains you might help you deliver this message, right? And then you have security, right? So how do you reason about security? Now, IPC has IPC is, again, it's a pretty complete standard, right? So give you like a message standard that you're able to, you're able to if you define your message the same way, you can work with other Cosmos chains, for example. And routing is, I think, if we have EVM, this is where things get interesting. Is I think we may see different type of routing technologies, because this is not in IBC standard itself, right? But for Cosmos ecosystem, this is like Cosmos Hub and other hubs that could do the routing. And then so I think routing is still unknown. We'll see how they evolve. It could be a hub spoke, it could be like a multiple hubs, and so on and so forth. And then you have security. I think this is the most important or most interesting part. IBC at its current form assumes client verification, right? So if you stay in the Cosmos ecosystem, then this is just built in. Now, if you introduce EVM or other third-party blockchains, I don't think it's as straightforward. There is an attempt, again, to use zero-knowledge proof to sort of unite everything, right? To be the sort of security module for everything. But I think that will probably take a long time to be mature. And also, if it matures, whether how fast different blockchains adopt them, it's probably going to be behind the growth of the number of blockchains that are going to be launched. So I think that is the area I'm not sure whether IBC's light client approach will be the dominant force. But yeah, but IBC, I think in general, is getting a lot of popularity, and at least for like message semantics and within Cosmic system, the routing side, it's becoming popular.
Right. Okay. So yeah, we need to get into the future section because we are running out of time. But before we do, I just want to mention to anybody who's listening out there, if you want to ask a question, feel free to do so at any time on YouTube. Most people tend to gravitate to Twitter for some reason, but if you want to actually interact, you have to be on YouTube. So yeah, if you have a question, feel free to ask that now, and we'll try to get to it if we have time at the very end. So let's see. We should talk about the future. We have a couple things that are still coming out. And let's see. The first one, of course, is Joy ID. Kevin, do you want to give us a synopsis on that?
Yeah. So again, Joy ID brings a lot of the advantage of Nervos even further, right? So it's not just crypto primitives of, for example, other blockchains, but you're able to use primitives of like hardware devices, right? So, for example, your phone may have a secure enclave that allow you to, for example, use the phone as a wallet, basically, right? And then use your Face ID or use your thumb to unlock. I mean, people are already using this today, right? Unlock some features. So we could tap into those capabilities and just use your phone as a wallet. Now, Joy ID sort of builds around that idea, but also allows you to have backup phones. Give you interface, you can interact, and then give applications a set of APIs that can interact and allow you to sign in and then interpret the account and so on and so forth. So that's Joy ID. So the goal for Joy ID is really to bring sort of the Web2 experience into crypto, right? So to onboard mass user adoption.
Right, right. Yeah, and we've talked about Joy ID a couple months ago, and we've been it's been out there for people to play with a little bit, just so you can see the early version. It's really, really slick. The onboarding is a beautiful thing. Like you just open up the website, and it asks you, like, if you're on a phone, it'll ask you for your thumbprint, and then that's it. You're basically onboarded at that point. And they're building in all kinds of great new features of social recovery and biometric authentication, things which are all based around, of course, the hardware level security, and made possible by Nervos our layer one CKP foundation, which supports the account abstraction. So Joy ID is supposed to be a cross-platform solution, and I just asked Cypher last night about what the current status is. So it is on testnet right now. Developers that want to get started early, they're welcome to start looking at it. And I think they're working on one more major update to it, which they found some kind of a new algorithm that they're going to use to integrate support for Bitcoin and Ethereum, which is really interesting because they're doing that in a completely non-custodial way. So I don't even fully know how that works exactly yet, but they figured something out there.
Yeah, we can bring them on.
Yeah,
yeah, in one of these talks.
Yeah. This is fantastic. This is going to be a big stepping stone in making it easier for any dApp to integrate and bring in from all of these different ecosystems, bring things into Nervos-based apps. So let's see. CKB auth. We should talk about this one briefly. Kevin, you want to give us the synopsis?
Yeah, so CKB auth, I think it's right now it's still a set of libraries on GitHub, but I think it's already deployed. Last time I checked it, they deployed maybe like a couple weeks ago or 1 week ago, very recently. And so this is sort of an evolution of OmniLock, right? So has much more, and I think support like 10 or 15 different chains. I may be wrong, but at least like somewhere between 8 and 10 different blockchains, and including some of the UTXO alliance chains like Cardano, obviously Bitcoin, Dogecoin, Ethereum, maybe Solana as well. I mean, this is again, they're better packaged, and then it's a piece of developer tool. So this is probably end users won't see it right away, but it's more for the developers.
Yeah, it's really something aimed at developers to make it easier for them to build their smart contracts. I think one of the things that we ran into that was quite difficult for developers was once they've made the decision, we want to do a multi-chain dApp. Where do we find all these algorithms? Where what library should we choose? And that's a difficult and important solution. You choose the wrong library, all of a sudden people are getting hacked. So you have to find these reliable libraries. And this is a lot of redundant work when you think about it for somebody, every dApp developer to have to do this. So it really made sense to put all of this kind of under one single package where we've really checked through it. And this is building, I would say this is kind of building on the back of OmniLock in some ways, even though actually technically I believe they said in the future OmniLock is going to probably utilize CKB auth to add more support for additional chains. I have the list here. So for CKB auth, it supports the basic ones that OmniLock supports today, which is CKB, multisig, Ethereum, EOS, Tron, Bitcoin, and Dogecoin. But it also supports Schnorr signatures, which is the new one from Bitcoin, Litecoin, Cardano, Monero, and they have planned support for XRP and Solana in the future.
Yep.
Okay, so we're running out of time. Let's get to the important one here, Khalani, the Universal Liquidity Protocol. What is this?
Yeah. So so Khalani is the product that my team has been working on for the last several months, and we're happy to sort of let the Nervos bring to the Nervos community and to have the first scoop. So Khalani is basically, it's built on Exxon, on the infrastructure side, and it's going to take all advantage of everything we talk about today, and it's going to be launched that's its own blockchain, and but its focus is on the liquidity layer, right? So we talk about even interoperability as different layers. We have the message passing layer. On top of that, it's the liquidity layer, and then on top of that, typically application layer or aggregation layer. But the liquidity layer is what I believe is the most critical missing piece today in interoperability. If you look at what we have to offer, what we don't have is the liquidity, because regardless of how you want to bring these blockchains together, you have to have the way to have transactions happen smoothly, right? So without liquidity, the only thing you can do is basically lock and mint, right? So you have to let the users on the other side to hold the bridge minted tokens, which is how like the multi-chain and all the stuff we talked in the very beginning, how like bridges get hacked and users are become very sad, right? Because their tokens become worthless. Whereas for liquidity solution, the idea is that when you swap, you always get the native token on the other side, right? So if you move from Ethereum to, for example, BNB chain on USDC, every step of the way, you only have native tokens backed by Circle, right? So that's way more safe, and then a better user experience. And then instead of relying on minting, you rely on liquidity, user to provide liquidity on both sides. And then this sort of bridge also will charge a fee to compensate for the cost of capital for liquidity providers. But I think this is really the interface that developers will be work with, because it will unite all these cryptographic features. It will expose SDK for developers to build on top, and then it will project remote state from 20, 30 connected chains all to the Khalani chain itself, and which is the Axon chain, so that you can sort of build apps on this blockchain and then run everywhere, right? So you're able to utilize liquidity from everywhere, right? So liquidity providers can provide liquidity on, for example, Ethereum, and then be able to service use cases from the other 19 different blockchains, right? You can provide liquidity on Godwoken, and again, to service the demand from, I'm just using 20 as an example, all the other blockchains. So a lot of the real sort of benefits of interoperability, I mean, even like within Nervos, we talk about this for a couple of years now. The reason that people don't see it in production, it's because the technology we offer and the use cases that the benefits people will see, there's still a gap, right? So this is what we've been working to fill that gap. And then once you have those liquidity solutions to have, this will facilitate seamless experiences. For example, as oftentimes as an ecosystem that are still in development, you see a lot of sort of two-sided market problems, right? So for example, to get developers, you want to be able to have funds and liquidity, right? And to be able to have funds and liquidity, you want to have users. To have users, you have to have apps, which require developers, right? And then to have apps, you have to be able to have infrastructure, which is, for example, fiat on-ramp. If you build an NFT solution, you want to have the NFT solutions to have access to mass users. Then you have to have a way that users can swipe a credit card and pay $10 for NFT, for example, right? Fiat on-ramps to your own native tokens or stable coins. So it's all like it's all like a multi-sided market problem. And the typical way you want to tackle this problem is you want to be able to build on one side or provide on one side, right? So just use the fiat on-ramp example that I talked about, right? So instead of, and by the way, we have done this in the past. Instead of go to all the fiat on-ramp solution providers and then go through BD and talk about and even pay for these services, they all charge very high amount, and it's not a one-time fee either. So in order to have to pay for these services, you could just use blockchains that already have these services integrated. For example, Polygon as a cheap chain that's have a lot of these fiat on-ramp solutions enabled, and then even to different countries, right? Regardless which country you're in, there's probably a service provider that can serve you on Polygon, right? So then you can have user swipe a card and then just get, for example, USDC on Polygon, and then the rest of it, you just shoot the USDC from Polygon to your chain, Godwalk, Khalani, or whatever. That's where the magic is, right? So you swipe a card, get $100, you get $100 USDC from there, and then just automatically shoots across the chain. And then you have $100 landed in your Godwalk or Khalani chain account. And then from there, you can also attach a message to say, once you get here, this is what I want you to do, right? So for the end users, again, as long as it's very fast confirmation, for the end users, it's just a few, like 3-4 seconds of extra latency. And then they can do, they can get the benefits of, fiat on-ramps and everything else.
Yeah,
for example, NFT marketplace, right? So as a new ecosystem, maybe you don't have, have NFT marketplace. If you do, then maybe there isn't a lot of transactions or volume or demand or liquidity on the NFT marketplace, right? So you can just use one key to list your NFTs, and either on another different blockchains NFT marketplace, or you can list on your own NFT marketplace and allow a different blockchain user to shoot their money across the network to buy, right? And even for exchange as well. Like for Godwalk, and if you have USDT, you can deposit into Binance. But with the right liquidity solution, you can just basically take the user's USDT, shoot into a contract, and then relay it through the interoperability solution, and then to Binance Smart Chain, and then from there you can just deposit to Binance. So it's all automated, right? So for new ecosystems, you allow it's like a borrowing other ecosystem infrastructure, and then you can build applications and developers and users and funds, sort of still utilizing other ecosystem infrastructure. And when you have critical mass, you can build out those yourself, right? For a slightly improved user experience, right? So that's the idea. And the same thing for like a DeFi. I mean, even DeFi is a very like a network event. It's a critical network event that maybe you want to have, lending. You want to have interest swap markets. You want to have DEX, and DEX. It's arguably it's less. It's more difficult to go across the blockchain because the latency introduces, and MEV stuff and all that. But for a lot of the other sort of protocols, it's much easier. They're not time sensitive. It doesn't. They're not price sensitive, right? So you can borrow other protocol networks, source for yield, and then allow people to sort of have access to financial services while they hold your native token. And that's very typical for new blockchains where your critical mass of wealth is concentrating your native tokens, where people are still and people waiting for sort of new ecosystem to be built. So people don't have a lot of things to do if they only hold your native tokens. For Nervos, they're putting Nervos DAO. For POS blockchain, they probably just do staking, and then beyond that, not too much, right? So even you have a stable coin, okay, I can borrow with stable coin. I've got, I borrow 50% of my TV, my holding to a stable coin. Now, what can I do with a stable coin? Not much, right? So again, it's a double-sided or multi-sided situation. But what we could do is you can borrow other ecosystems DeFi infrastructure, right? It's the same idea. That and this is what Khalani is able to provide as well, right? So to any sort of emerging blockchains, Khalani would be able to essentially like be like a layer 2 for multiple chains, right? And be able to say, now you can use Khalani to be able to leverage Khalani to get yield, and to access to any financial services that you need. You want to leverage trade, you want to do like leverage farming, you want to do delta neutral and stuff like that. Again, it's an end-to-end blockchain interoperability solution with integration patterns. You can integrate with remote chains applications utilizing its own liquidity. So the missing piece here that hasn't, we haven't been able to enable all this before, it's because we don't have a necessary liquidity solution to be able to drive all this. But once that is there, I think really we are able to abstract away blockchains, right? So we can say, with one click of button, you're able to, take your CKBs and borrow against your CKB holdings, and then leverage your CKB like 3 times bull on CKB, right? Or provide markets for CKB ETH trading pairs on, for example, Binance Smart Chain. At the same time, hedge against your ETH exposure, right? To do like a leverage short on a perps markets on Arbitrum. So that, for a developer to build that based on peer-to-peer message passing today would require a lot of just gluing together applications and peer to pairwise message passing, right? But what we want to do for Khalani is to concentrate liquidity, so developers can just build their solutions connecting to all the chains that Khalani connects to, and also have direct access to guaranteed liquidity. So I think we're probably a little bit over time here, but that's the experience that we want to expose.
Yeah. I mean, there's some really important stuff in there. I mean, I've never even thought about the onboarding problem that we've been having. I actually, there's been a headline running this morning that Bank of America has been shutting down accounts of anybody who's been interacting with Coinbase, I think it was.
Wow.
Yeah, it's an ongoing thing. I mean, we've seen this for years, but yeah, Bank of America is one of the newest ones. And when you think about it, worldwide, how many banks are there out there to interact with? How many different on ramps? How would you on ramp somebody from India, for example? Like, as somebody building a developer in the United States, this is not the stuff you want to think about. We want to get away from these types of individual developers having to focus on so many slightly nuanced things to a more universal protocol which accomplishes all of this. So I mean, that's really what Khalani is, it sounds like. And
I think it's just allow developer to treat blockchain as abstraction, right? So you no longer have to think about blockchains, and then just take the best things from each blockchain. For example, like I said, Polygon is very good for real world infrastructure integrations. So they have custody, they have fiat on ramp, they have good exchange access, and so on and so forth, right? And Binance Smart Chain obviously very close to Binance. It's like an exchange chain that you can easily access to go and out exchange. Arbitrum is sort of a derivative chain, or DeFi, sort of the and Ethereum has the best, most amount of users, and probably the most amount of whales, right? So Nervos is the best, interoperability primitives that allow all these users to just skip a lot of the onboarding stuff, use their own wallets and stuff like that. So you can build an app and show up on the wallet of 20 different blockchains, and then have like 20x your user exposure. And then for them, it's all like using their local blockchain. So that's what I think the missing piece is. And then Khalani is currently on testnet, and we're looking at mainnet towards the end of the year, or maybe even faster. I think 2 or 3 months or so. So it'll be exciting once we get there. I think from even just from like a pure yield point of view, I think we should be able to provide early users not instead of its tokens, just pure organic yields, probably at least 20, 30, 40%, something like there, just by smart hunting out the right yield from different sources, and then apply leverage at the right time. But anyway, so I think we're a little bit beyond that's a lot more specific.
Yeah. So we are a little bit over time, so we do need to wrap up. And before we do, I saw there was one general question I'm going to just throw up very quickly. Uh, what exactly are the nodes, and is there an easy, cheap way for a mainstream people to run one? The nodes is what creates decentralization within our
Yep.
network. Is there a super easy way to run one? I would say generally not, unless you want to pay for it with like a node provider or something.
Probably just download
You
Neuron and run Neuron. It's that
Neuron, yeah, that's true.
Neuron
That's
is
true. That is
the
the easy
easiest.
way. Neuron right now, if you use it in full node mode, just
Yeah,
running
that's the
Neuron and
easiest.
keeping it
You
running
have a
is the
wallet and
easiest
you're
way.
running a node. Yeah.
And I think the deeper question is there a way to earn money from this through like staking or something? Not today, but in the future, possibly as we start to roll out proof of stake based systems. So that's something to look forward to as well. But that's a topic for another episode. We are over time. We need to wrap up. Kevin, do you have any final thoughts you'd like to leave the audience with today?
Yeah, I think we cover a lot of grounds, and I think interoperability itself is a very, very exciting frontier. And as blockchain industry matures, I think one thing that we know for certain, regardless what path we're taking, what use cases we enable the next bull market and whatnot, one thing we know that is certain, there will be more and more blockchains. And then whenever you have more blockchains, you need interoperability, liquidity, and all this, right? And if you look at the protocols that are, if you look at the OG protocols like for example, Ethereum and other chains, it's always these 2, 3, 4, like the more like Aave, the Uniswap, the Curve, and the whatnot. All fundamentally, they're all liquidity protocols, right? So whoever like wins the liquidity game, I think that will be the foundation for the further growth. So yeah, so we want to be able to start attracting liquidity, and then make Nervos a liquidity hub of all these different blockchains. I think we're way too early. Not too many people are doing what we're doing at all. So it could be interesting journey.
Yeah, absolutely. I can't wait to see more on Khalani. I'm going to be following it personally. And I'd like to leave with one quote here. The next phase of DeFi is cross-chain fi. That's, of course, a quote by Kevin from his Twitter. I believe that completely. And I can't wait to see what comes of Khalani. This is a fantastic sounding product. So anyway, with that, we need to wrap up here. So I want to thank you, Kevin, for taking some time out of your day to join us today. And of course, thank you to everybody
Absolutely.
out there who's listening across Twitter and YouTube. We will be back next month. Until then, all right, take care, everybody.
Bye bye, everyone.